Is there anywhere else we could possibly start when it comes to the 2026 Barcelona Catalunya Grand Prix? I don't think so. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and what an absolute treat it was to see Sir Lewis Hamilton win for the first time in Ferrari there in Spain this weekend, a weekend in which it did not seem like Ferrari were really going to be challenging for a win. But Hamilton said, absolutely not. I'll be taking this one for myself. Thank you very much. And it was an incredible sight to see. We're going to be talking about everything that happened over this Grand Prix, though, and we'll take a look at our predictions we made before the weekend began, see if we could bounce back from a 0-point weekend the last time out in Monaco. But without further ado, let's not beat around the bush any longer than we have to. It's the 2026 Barcelona Catalunya Grand Prix reaction. Okay, I would wear the hat the whole time, but I really am just not a hat person, and I've just had that hat in my closet for a long time and figured it was the perfect time to bust it out for a video. So it's gonna live there for today, and then we'll see if it comes back out, because Lewis Hamilton has been on an absolute tear. Let's go ahead, kick things off with our quick hits, and where else can you possibly begin than Lewis Hamilton remembering once again who he is. He talked about over this weekend and in the past that it actually has been a lot of fans yelling at him to remember who he is. And it really seems like he has done exactly that. For the first time since Belgium in 2024, when he was still with Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton crosses the line first and wins his first Grand Prix for Scuderia Ferrari on the, essentially, I believe is the 30th year anniversary of Michael Schumacher also taking his first win for Ferrari, also in Spain. It is an unbelievable story. Hamilton was on fire basically from the jump in this one. Ferrari gave him a bit of an alternative strategy that really worked in his favor, and he made the most of the opportunity. He ended up getting a little fortunate with the virtual safety car thanks to Fernando Alonso's retirement. But ultimately, it looked like Lewis was on an entirely different level today when it came to pace. I firmly believe that even if he had not gotten that virtual safety car, that he would still have won this race, because he was absolutely flying. And that strategy that Ferrari put him on worked to an absolute treat. Lewis Hamilton is a race winner once again, and I think I can speak for everybody when I say that everybody absolutely loved that. As much fun as the story of Hamilton's win for Ferrari is, there actually is another conversation that we need to have, and I think it's one that has been bubbling up over the last few rounds, but it's really starting to come to a head at this point, and that is centered around the Mercedes power unit reliability issues, because Kimi Antonelli, our championship leader at this point, retires from the Barcelona Catalunya Grand Prix after passing George Russell on track, ends up retiring for one reason or another. I don't think I've seen a specific reason. It just seemed like it was a loss of power, hydraulic issue, something. And unfortunately for him, it's another example of a Mercedes power unit conking out. We've seen, obviously, McLaren has gotten the bug a lot, Lando Norris specifically. George Russell has been the unfortunate recipient of a couple of reliability DNFs and issues. Obviously, teams like Alpine and Williams have also had moments of power unit problems, and this is something that I think is going to start modifying the outcome of this World Championship, because Kimi Antonelli went from looking like he was on the back foot all weekend to passing his teammate and championship rival on track just to have his car conk out in just a single lap later. So this is a long string of issues for the Mercedes power unit, and I'm interested to see what comes of it in the future, because they got to get this thing figured out, because if not, it's going to have moments like this. Lewis Hamilton, even winning this race, would not have done the damage it did with Kimi Antonelli's retirement. It went from Lewis Hamilton being in second, 57, 58 points off the lead, to now in the 40s. This is a big swing, and if these reliability issues are going to continue, there will continue to be these big swings, because not only did Lewis put 25 points on Kimi's head, George Russell also now gets the benefit of putting 18 points on Kimi as well. He still has plenty of runway to go. Like, let's not make it anything more than it absolutely has to be. But this is something that we certainly need to be watching out for. On a wider scale, I think it's time to talk about, once again, the thing that really spices up Formula One races more than anything. It's not upgrades, it's not pure pace, it is absolutely tire strategy. That, I think, is what a lot of this race came down to. The degradation around Spain was absolutely through the roof this weekend, with Pirelli opting to take one step softer tires than they did last year. It seemed like it's slam dunk 2-stop minimum, even having some teams like Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari opting for the 3-stop instead to do something a little different. And I just have to say once again that all it takes to make a F1 race fun is to implement or force a bit of tire strategy. I'm hoping Pirelli are taking some notes, because it really put a lot of teams behind the 8 ball to try and figure out the best strategy for them. And ultimately it gave us this, Hamilton offset strategy compared to the 2 Mercedes, and it gave us an absolute banger. Virtual safety car notwithstanding, it was a fantastic choice. It forced Mercedes to get interesting and forced them to make a tough call. They ended up doing that, and at the end of the day, it definitely kept them from challenging for the win at the end. So that also had a lot to do with Hamilton's pace, but at the same time, it only takes a little bit of tire strategy required to make an F1 Grand Prix that much more exciting. Keep it up. Continuing on the Spain thoughts and ideas around Spain in general, since it's got to be on the calendar here. I think this is it, actually. I lied. This is it for Spain. I'm relishing the idea that a track like Spain is now going to be off the calendar for a little bit with the introduction of the Madrid Grand Prix, which I believe is in the new Spanish Grand Prix. It is a track that we're losing that really tests these cars and these drivers to the absolute limit. I mean, we saw a lot of teams struggling for pace. Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin had never looked worse, I think, this season comparatively than this weekend. I mean, they were truly getting challenged in ways that they were not expecting, and they could not live up to the challenge. So I'm hoping that we'll see tracks like this come back on the calendar, because I love seeing these specific tracks. It can turn into a bit of snooze fest, but at the same time, if you really like getting into the nitty gritty of watching a track challenge a field to the limit, this is definitely one of those. And so I, for one, am going to miss the Barcelona Catalunya circuit. I hope it comes back on the calendar at some point, but it was a whole heck of a lot of fun to see it put out there once again this weekend in extremely challenging conditions and testing these teams to the max. Honestly, I don't know what else there really is to say about this weekend other than the Grand Prix being an absolute gauntlet for some of these teams and cars, because not only did we see, 6 cars DNF, or more than that, 8 cars DNF? I can't even remember at this point. Alex Albon did end up going back out, but he still didn't classify because he did not complete enough laps. It was a gauntlet out there, and I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about potentially the unluckiest DNF I think I could ever possibly see happen to Nico Hülkenberg. If you somehow didn't see this, Nico Hülkenberg ended up retiring from this race. He pulled into the pits and retired, and not a lot of us really knew why. I think we all sort of chalked it up to Audi, unreliability. We haven't not seen that before. I mean, it wouldn't be anything new. But then it comes out that when he was chasing down Liam Lawson went a little wide, kicked up a little bit of gravel, and actually hit the emergency cutoff switch on Hülkenberg's car. Each F1 car has a lever on it for if the marshals need to move the car to make it safe. There's an emergency kill switch on the exterior of the car. A piece of gravel hit it so perfectly that it cut power to Hülkenberg's car immediately, and unfortunately for him, that was it. He finally makes it into Q3. He's running well inside the points, was showing good pace, and in a blink of an eye, his race was over. Absolutely insane. And at the end, when it was all said and done, there were more DNFs than I believe any other race this season. I might have to fact check myself on that one though. So what a wild weekend for sure. Let's move on now to talk about our weekend winners and losers. Let's begin with our weekend winner, and who else could it be than Sir Lewis Hamilton? It is an incredible weekend to be not only an F1 fan, but a Lewis fan, a Ferrari fan, just a fan in general, because this was a long time coming and it was incredible to see happen live. What a weekend for Lewis and Ferrari to get his first for the team. His first non-Mercedes power unit driven car, by the way, to get a win, non-Mercedes power unit win. That was a crazy stat actually after this one. Incredible scenes. Lewis was lights out, literally from lights out to checkered flag. He showed a lot of really good pace, and he really seemed to get the most out of that Ferrari. I mean, he ended up beating George Russell, who took second by over 20 seconds. which is unheard of at this point, considering how dominant the Mercedes has been. That they've won every single Grand Prix this year, except for one now. Lewis Hamilton takes that spot from them and earns himself his inaugural win in Scuderia Red. Let's go ahead and move on to our weekend loser, and I'll start us off with an honorable mention, and I'm going with Fernando Alonso for this because my goodness, in what could potentially be your final home race at Barcelona Catalunya, you end up qualifying last, breaking a streak of over 40 races where he outqualified Lance Stroll, to then DNFing and handing Lewis Hamilton a race win. If you're a Fernando Alonso, that's got to be just like top 10 worst races of your career. Not only is it potentially your last at Barcelona Catalunya, to qualify behind Stroll, and your DNF handed Lewis Hamilton a win. Like, let's not mince words. Fernando Alonso retiring when he did handed Lewis Hamilton the win, which is incredible to say. Honorable mention, it was really close, and I had him down as my weekend loser before Kimi Antonelli ultimately DNF'd here. This is a result that I don't think many of us would have expected or be disappointed or unexpectedly happen later in the season. But to come off of 5 race wins in a row, you qualify in the top 3, you're looking decent, you have good pace, you pass George Russell on track by pace standards, just to have that Mercedes power unit cut out on you a lap later. And instead of damage limitation to the max, you end up losing them losing the max amount of points to your title rivals. Lewis Hamilton, who was in second, remains in second, gets 25 points on you. He's now only in the 40s away from Kimi in the standings. And George, your teammate who is sharing the best car on the grid, also gets to put 18 points on your head as well. And so it is a tough weekend for Kimi Antonelli. I think it was the first time we saw him really be behind George in terms of pace over a single lap, as well as in moments in the race. Although when it was all said and done, I think it's pretty safe to say that George was really struggling with the balance of the car down the stretch, and Kimi, more power to him, absolutely sent it in on George Russell, unfortunately, before he had to retire. So in the grand scheme of things, will this one play a part in the championship? No, it's still a little too early for that, but I think when it's all said and done, this is about as worst case scenario for Antonelli, considering the positions they were in when it happened. So unfortunate for him. All right, let's move on to reviewing our predictions that we made before the weekend began, and we are trying to bounce back from an absolutely horrific showing in the Monaco Grand Prix where I scored a fat 0 points in Monaco. We're bouncing back in a big way. It was a decent showing for me in predictions this week, and so we're gonna ride this one out and hopefully bounce back once again in Austria. Got to start closing up the gap in our community predictions championship, so we're getting there, I promise. Let's go ahead and start with my pick for biggest positive surprise, and I went with Nico Hülkenberg this time out because, and I was rightfully so, believing that Nico Hülkenberg, who is really good around Spain, would finally get in the points for Audi and finally put together a weekend instead of being one of the most unlucky drivers on the grid. Alas, he is one of the most unlucky drivers on the grid, and he ended up making it into Q3 for the first time this season, running in the points, and then unfortunately DNFing. We did talk with the community, and we are awarding me half points because he was running extremely well in the points and was definitely looking like he would have finished in the points, and so they graciously gave me a half point on this one because it's not Nico's fault that he DNF'd, and truly it is one of the most bizarre reasons to DNF I think I've ever heard of. So we're kicking things off already better than last time out. Half a point on biggest positive surprise. My pick for biggest disappointment, I went with Fernando Alonso. This was entirely he scored a point in Monaco. I refuse to believe that Aston Martin would be anywhere close to on the pace in Barcelona, and I was absolutely correct. He qualifies last. He is out qualified by Stroll for the first time in over 40 races. Crazy. And then also he ends up DNFing and handing Lewis a win. So that is a big disappointment for Fernando Alonso. And so big point for me there, as I'm now 1.5 out of 2 to kick things off. Next thing up, let's take a look at our qualifying top 3. I had a Kimi Antonelli pole position, a Lewis Hamilton P2, and a George Russell P3. Now, if I had done my normal strategy of what I had been doing, I would have put George on pole and Kimi third, in which I would have nailed it. But unfortunately not. I did end up getting 2 total points here getting Lewis Hamilton exactly on, and then Mercedes basically just flip-flopping them. And so already we are flying past ourselves from a week ago. As we move on now to my race podium, I had a Kimi Antonelli win, I had a George Russell P2, and a Lewis Hamilton P3. Obviously, Lewis ended up taking the win. George did, in fact, take second place. Kimi Antonelli did DNF. So another 1.5 points for me. As we move on to our final prediction, our one crazy prediction. I've scored at least a half point in every single prediction this far. Can I clean sweep? The answer is absolutely not. My one crazy prediction was that a car that began the race in P17 or below would finish in the points. And this actually wasn't looking too far off with the help of all the DNFs. But unfortunately, all the cars that qualified P17 and below were the worst cars on the grid, and it was never going to happen. We were going to need at least a handful more DNFs to get there. So regardless, not a bad showing for me on the grand scheme of things. If we take a look at our standings in the Community Predictions Championship, I took home 5 points this weekend. Love to see that. We now have a current standings of British TTG remaining in front with 25 points. F1 Inferno now in sole second place with 23.5 points. I move forward remaining in third with 22.5 points. And Spectral and Senel unfortunately did not get their predictions in this weekend, so they remain on 11.5 points and 5.5 points respectively. So a solid showing for predictions for me. We need to keep it up. I'm trying to mount my championship defense, and it's going to start next time out in Austria, I promise. All right, let's move on to our penultimate section here in our race reaction. It is our 3 lingering questions. And honestly, there are some pretty intriguing questions that are lingering from this weekend. And I think the biggest question we have to talk about is, can Ferrari or Hamilton truly challenge Mercedes in the World Drivers' Championship? It's an intriguing question. It is definitely a long season. I think that Ferrari and Hamilton are definitely building a lot of goodwill right now. He has been on an absolute tear so far these last handful of races, and basically since Canada, where he really started to pick it up. And now that he has a win under his belt and Antonelli DNFing, it's something that we at least have to mention. He is still in sole second place in the World Drivers' Championship, and it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on, because if he's able to continue with this sort of performances, it's not out of the realm of possibility, especially with the upgrades that are going to go on. Ferrari have the opportunity to make engine upgrades. Time could tell. Watch this space. Next question that I have is, will Mercedes power unit reliability to continue to play a factor in the championship? And as of right now, it seems like the answer is unequivocally yes. We have seen more often than not this Canada, and this weekend specifically that I'm thinking of, with George retiring in Canada from the lead and Kimi Antonelli retiring from P2. It is going to get interesting, especially if a team or driver like Hamilton, and I'll throw Norris in there as well. Norris is a little far off the back in terms of the championship, but they are going to be there to pick up those points. And if Mercedes is truly going to have these moments where they're DNFing from advantageous positions, it will come into play. And so it's something that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on. But we have to start asking those questions, because we're almost 10, this was round 9 if you include Bahrain and Jeddah. I'm going to, just for simplicity's sake. And we're a pretty decent chunk into the season at this point, and it's still something that's going on. So we're going to keep an eye on this. And then my last question, which actually is interesting coming off of this race in Spain, is the top of the grid closer than we thought? Mercedes, I think, is still clearly the best car on average, but we are starting to see those gaps shrink a little bit. This weekend was a big one for me, especially with Hamilton's pace over Russell in that last stint, as well as Norris being able to keep tabs on the dueling Mercedes before ultimately all the craziness at the end happened. And so there's something to keep an eye on here, especially with some of these things that have come in about, new technical directives coming in, and sort of this upgrades going on cars. I think the top of the grid might be starting to close up a little more than we need to start talking about, because it's going to tighten up as the season goes on, and it's a space I'm very eagerly going to watch out for. That only leaves one question remaining. What is next in Formula One? We get a nice week off before F1 heads to the hills of Austria for the Austrian Grand Prix. I believe it is a return to the sprint format. Don't quote me on that. I don't have those races memorized because why would you? It has been historically. I'm just going to say it is for fun. Last year in the Grand Prix, we saw a Norris, Piastri, Leclerc podium. Who are we going to see this year? I feel like it's going to be a much different grouping, but it is going to get very fun nonetheless. Let me know down in the comment section below what you think is going to happen next week, because I'm curious. But there we have it. But unbelievable weekend in Spain. Hamilton gets his win, Antonelli gets his DNF, and a lot of questions remain on the outcome of this Drivers' Championship as this season is starting to get into the meat and the potatoes. We will be back in a week and a bit for our predictions leading up to the Austrian Grand Prix. If you made it this far into the video, I truly appreciate you. Leave a like rating on the video because it really does help me out. And if you haven't already, subscribe down below. We'd love to have you join our small little community. But until then, guys, enjoy this week off. Try and recover from this Hamilton win. And then we'll be back when it's all said and done in a couple of weeks for the Austrian Grand Prix. But until then, guys, I'll see you in the next one.